Hello, everyone, and welcome to NYC Builds Bio virtual webinar in collaboration with Albert Einstein College of Medicine and Simone Healthcare Development. This webinar is entitled The Scientific Medical Renaissance in a New Bronx. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Nancy Kelly, and I serve on the steering committee and as a founding member of NYC Builds Bio. I would like to acknowledge the founding and corporate members of NYC Builds Bio who make this programming possible. I also want to thank the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and Simone Healthcare Development for hosting this webinar. Since its founding in 1955, the mandate of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine has been to combine the pursuit of scientific excellence with the social mission to improve human health through engagement in local, national, and global communities. Not only has Einstein College of Medicine been instrumental in responding to New York City's recent COVID challenges, but it has also helped to build the New York City life science ecosystem, commercializing its technology through licensing and sponsored research, invention disclosures and patent filings, and the creation of nearly 50 life science companies. Today, it is adding another important new resource to New York City's shared facilities and cores, a new facility called the Einstein Montefiore Biotechnology Accelerated Research Center. Close by the Einstein College of Medicine, Simone Healthcare is taking the Bronx to new heights with the expansion of the company's Hutchinson Metro Center, currently a 1.4 million square foot mixed-use campus of Class A office, medical, retail, hospitality, and academic space on 42 acres. Upon completion of the expansion, the Hutchinson Metro Center will total 3.4 million square feet across 75 acres and will be a vibrant, knowledge-oriented ecosystem and academic center for higher education, healthcare, life sciences, and research and development, supported by commercial enterprise and 2 residential buildings available for students, science, researchers, and healthcare professionals. This webinar is part of an ongoing series of online events hosted by NYC Builds Bio. You can view the series on the events page of the NYC Builds Bio website. And want you to remember to register for our flagship event, the 2020 Annual Life Science Real Estate Development Symposium, scheduled to begin on October 23rd. We will be announcing the agenda shortly, which is jam-packed with interesting speakers and highlights exciting new developments for New York. Our new media partner, Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology News, will be advertising this event both nationally and internationally. Now I want to introduce our speakers today. Dr. Gordon Tomaselli, the Maryland Stanley M. Katz Dean, Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and Executive Vice President and Chief Academic Officer, Montefiore Medicine. Dr. Harris Goldstein, Professor of Pediatrics, Microbiology, and Immunology, Associate Dean for Scientific Resources, and Charles Michael Chair in Autoimmune Diseases. Guy Liebler, President, Simone Healthcare Development, and his colleague, Megan Guy, Vice President of Development, Simone Healthcare Development. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Before we begin, I just wanted to cover a few administrative details. There is a program in PowerPoint highlighting the hosts and speakers for the meeting. These will be posted on the NYC Builds Bio website after the meeting, and the program's being recorded and will be distributed to all registrants. If anyone's having technical difficulties accessing the Zoom room or other issues, please email info@nycbuildsbio.org or send a notice through the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Since most of you are participating in listen-only mode, please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will open up for discussion and Q&A at the end of the program, and will address as many audience questions as possible. At the end of the meeting, we will have a chance for smaller randomized groups to meet in separate rooms where you can open your videos and microphones to talk to each other. You can stay as long as you like and get to know each other and share stories. Now I will open it up to Dr. Tomaselli, who will tell us about what the Einstein College of Medicine is doing in the Bronx.
Thank you, Nancy. And I'm going to ask Dr. Goldstein to share his slides, which are our slides. And again, thank you for that introduction. My name is Gordon Tomaselli. I am the Dean at Albert Einstein and the Chief Academic Officer of Montefiore Medicine. My background is I'm a cardiologist and a basic researcher, or at least was a basic researcher, having had an NIH-funded laboratory that I ran for about 25 to 27 years. 2 years ago, I came back to Einstein because I was a graduate of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, the class of 1982. I will say a couple things about the College of Medicine. First, there are two kind of overarching principles that have driven the college since its inception in the 1950s. One is the desire to generate new knowledge. It is a research-intensive academic medical school. And second, the lens that we look at things through, whether it's science or clinical care, is a lens of social justice and really focused on what we're doing in the Bronx. So those are the two things that attracted me as a student, and they're the things that attracted me to come back as the dean. So let me describe a little bit about the College of Medicine. The next slide. As you've heard, we've been around since the early 1950s. We have about 725 medical students, 158 PhD students, and about 100 MD and PhD students simultaneously matriculating in our MD program and PhD program. Our research programs are intensive and well staffed with 265 postdoctoral trainees, a number of clinical research trainees in master's programs, and folks in our bioethics master's program. We have over 1,800 full-time faculty. However, only about 300 of those are what I would consider bench investigators. We are well-funded federally with NIH primarily, but federal funding of about $220 million per year. The school has a number of NIH-funded centers that I'll describe in just a minute, as well as centers of excellence, which are funded in a variety of different ways. Dr. Goldstein will tell you a little bit later about our shared facilities and cores, of which there are over 50. And the College of Medicine is a founding member of the New York Genome Center, as well as the New York Structural Biology Center. One other bit of history. We previously were the Medical School of Yeshiva University and made a transition beginning in 2005 and actually culminating in 2019 to become a unique division of Montefiore Medicine. Next slide. The Montefiore Medicine academic health system is really a health system that takes care of, I would say, the majority of the people in the borough of the Bronx, but also has locations in Westchester and in the lower Hudson Valley. There are 11 hospitals in our system, over 200 ambulatory care locations, about 40,000 associates or employees. The system operating revenue is about $6 billion. And we have over 2,400 practitioners, physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, et cetera. I would say that the clinical and clinical translational areas of expertise at Montefiore Medicine include pediatrics, transplant of a variety of different kinds, both heart, liver, solid organ transplantation, bone marrow transplantation, our cancer center, and our heart and vascular center. Next slide. So, like any medical school or health system, there's a combination of both basic science as well as clinical science or clinical departments. There are 11 basic science departments which actually cover the broad range of activities one might anticipate are important to both teaching as well as research in a medical school. And they include things like biochemistry, cell biology, molecular biology, population genetics, population health genetics, pharmacology, neuroscience, and systems and computational biology. Our clinical departments are both clinical departments, but several of them have a relatively large research footprint. And the departments cover all clinical areas that one might anticipate would be part of a health system. I would point out that the departments with a relatively large research footprint include medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry and behavioral sciences, radiation oncology, and oncology in general. And these are in close partnership with bench scientists in many cases at the College of Medicine. So again, translational science that actually covers in these areas the so-called T0 to T4 translational spectrum. Next slide. I mentioned our NIH-funded centers, and many of these centers have been around for decades. For example, the Albert Einstein Cancer Center has been around for over 45 years, and it's an exceptionally strong center. Dr. Goldstein leads the Einstein Rockefeller CUNY Collaborative Center for AIDS Research, and we have a number of other centers that are focused on diabetes, clinical and translational research, aging, liver disease, and the Rose F. Kennedy Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Research Center, IDDRC. There are a number of other centers of excellence that are not specifically NIH funded, but actually serve a number of purposes in the medical school and in the community. Bronx Hope is the Health Opportunities Partnership with Einstein program that really houses many of our pipeline programs for kids in the Bronx, and kids in the Bronx from literally from grade school and middle school up through and including postgraduate or postdoc baccalaureate students who are interested in careers in biomedicine. We also have centers for epigenetics. Our Children's Education and Research Center is for children with intellectual disabilities. Our Biophotonics and Magnetic Resonance Research Center supports a lot of the work that goes on in the college. Centers for Oncophysics, and our Institute for Stem Cells and Regenerative Medicine, as well as a Cardiovascular Research Center. Most of these centers are funded by philanthropic gifts. Next slide. We have a number of industry partnerships that have developed over the years and have provided us with access to not only the commercial space and interaction with the commercial space, but also a revenue line. And that revenue line has really includes licensing and royalties types of revenue, as well as grants from commercial entities, and has provided the college with about $75 million over the last 10 years or so. Next slide. Our technology transfer program is active for a relatively small number of investigators, and we have partnerships through licensing, both license options that have been executed, as well as startups that have been robust over the last decade as well. And we continue to grow, attempt to grow in this space. Next slide. As one might anticipate, a very active basic research intensive medical school has a number of opportunities for commercialization of discovery, and we've been doing a lot of this over the years. There was a little bit of a downtick probably in 2015, 2016, but things are picking up again with more invention disclosures and more patent filings. And actually, through the first half of the year in 2020, we're at a rate to increase both of these by about 15 to 20%. Next slide. I would say that we have several areas of focus on the science side, and this includes immunology and immunotherapeutics, as well as fundamental discoveries in biology. We have a large program in particularly viral diseases, very relevant to the current pandemic we find ourselves in, and we still are in it. And these are really kind of marketable technologies where we have worked with commercial partners to develop either testing paradigms or therapeutics in these spaces. And this is the concept, the emerging concept around something that Nancy mentioned, potential collaboration with the New York City Economic Development Corporation that Dr. Goldstein will tell you a bit more about later. Next slide. So this is the slide to remind me to turn it over to Harris, and basically summarizes what I've tried to tell you. It's a robust infrastructure here in the Bronx with the goal of, again, discovery and translating that discovery into therapeutics to improve human health, not only to improve human health in the medical space, but we view ourselves as a partner with the community. And in doing so, providing opportunities for people in the Bronx to actually become part of our biomedical infrastructure as not only as patients, but as employees and as folks who are going to train in our environment. So let me thank you for your attention. And the important part of the talk is going to be given now by Dr. Goldstein.
Thanks a lot, Dean Tomaselli. And I'm going to start by discussing and educating you about the various opportunities that are available to biotech companies and industrial partners in terms of accessing some of the incredibly robust shared facilities and cores that Einstein has developed. So we support, as the Dean said, over 50 shared scientific facilities and cores that provide our researchers with access to powerful and sophisticated genetic, molecular, structural, analytical, and statistical imaging technologies. And one can imagine that not every individual lab can develop the resources to have these technologies available to them. By having a shared facility, what this enables to do is to centralize these capacities in specific cores, and then the investigators, kind of like spokes to the center of a wheel, can access those without having to engage in the duplicative requirement of having their own equivalent capacity. And these shared facilities are staffed by highly experienced personnel. And again, it requires a significant level of training in order to be able to perform these sophisticated techniques, as well as access to expensive instrumentation in order to do these particular technologies. So again, by having cores, we centralize these services, centralize the talent required to run them, and centralize the equipment required, as well as to amortize the cost of the equipment and not having to buy the same equipment from multiple different investigators. And again, we have detailed information about these cores. We have, I'll show you next slide, a catalog that details the services we provide as well as the individuals providing them. And again, people can feel free to contact me or Dean Tomaselli to send you this catalog by email. And one of my jobs here as Associate Dean for Scientific Resources is overseeing these shared facilities and cores. I am assisted by Brian Pulowski, an MBA, who's the Assistant Dean for Scientific Operations, who does a really fantastic job coordinating this and maintaining the budget. Again, you can appreciate the fact that we're very mindful of the cost of this and basically run this like a business. And we basically bill between $10 and $15 million per year for these services that we do. And on the right is a cover of the catalog that we have, again, that you're free to obtain from us. The concept behind the global picture of the cores is that we look at it from 10,000 feet as providing different specialized support technologies, but it enables us to really provide the full spectrum of services required to start from the beginning in terms of identifying genes or causes or pathophysiology in diseases, and then clone out specific genes. We can knock those genes out in mouse models to see what the actual impact of them are. We can now express the gene, make proteins from the gene, image expression in cells, analyze the ultra protein structure of the genes. We can now target it with biomolecules, biologics, and other antibodies to try to either treat it or knock it out, and ultimately develop treatment. So this really, the spectrum of services we provide enables us to really provide from the initial discovery all the way to the development of therapeutics for our investigators. And again, this is just a listing of the different cores broken down by specific area of function which they provide. And again, this is in the catalog that you can obtain from us. And we're also clearly on the web. You can go to our website, which is www.einstein.yu.edu, Research Shared Facilities. This is the entree to the services. Again, it lists all the services. You click on them. It then goes into the different individual course services. And in addition, the access to these services is provided by the centralized iLab systems. And this iLab system, it's a commercial software that is integrated into our financial system and provides end-to-end management of our shared facilities. So it starts by initiating the request, routing the request, manages individual samples. We could track where the sample is in the process. You could reserve specific instrument access, generates usage reporting, billing, and invoicing, and again, can provide the individual with the results of their studies, again, all done through the internet. There's a single sign-on. We have Active Directory, so each faculty and student and postdoc has the unique Einstein Montefiore sign-on that enables researchers to just sign on and utilize the facilities. They are linked to specific grant sources to enable them to be automatically billed. We also have external users. Many industry biotech companies utilize our services. And again, we open an iLab account for them, and then they're able to access the core services and get billed for them. And then the iLab generates a billing invoice to the customer. And what's very important to many of our corporate partners is it provides them with detailed transaction reporting of specific services and specific users and the cost. And again, we're able to track usage as well as to make sure that the proper invoices are issued. In addition, we also participate in an online service called Science Exchange. That's an online R&D service that has over 2,500 suppliers. We have 13 of our cores as storefronts on their website. And again, the advantage of Science Exchange is it has a standardized contracting in terms of services, so it really facilitates access to corporations. And again, proposals and quotes are delivered through the Science Exchange platform. So there are really two methods of accessing our services, one directly through Einstein, and the second is through Science Exchange. Now, to kind of like talk about a little bit about how these core services not only serve Einstein investigators, but it also can be rapidly mobilized to serve external users. COVID-19 is a really excellent example of that. So as all of you who have lived through the pandemic and the dire days of March and April appreciate, New York City was a horrible situation with a tremendous number of infections and illnesses and hospitalizations and deaths. And the key over and over again was being said, we need to test in order to know who's infected, in order to isolate them and potentially provide early treatment. However, as all of you are familiar, there was a tremendous breakdown of the supply chain. You could not get the critical materials that were required in order to test individuals. If you didn't have these materials, you could talk about testing all you wanted, you could not do testing. New York City EDC basically came up with this approach of we will make our own tests. The city will basically obtain the ingredients required for testing themselves and therefore able to test New Yorkers. As part of this process, the New York City EDC recruited Einstein, our shared facilities, to markedly expand COVID-19 testing in New York City. They approached us to support their independent testing capabilities. And one of the critical ingredient that was required for doing testing is called viral transport media. It's the fluid in which the swabs that are inserted into the nasopharynx are put into to allow the virus to be maintained in order for it to be detected. And this is very critical because clearly if you lose the virus, you're not going to be able to detect that. And this is a relatively sophisticated requirement to make this product, and we had the capacity to do that. And the city asked us, can we make viral transport media for them because you could not buy it commercially. They were completely out throughout the country. They also recruited print parts to make the swabs, collab to put the kits together. And in fact, this was highlighted by Mayor de Blasio in a press conference that we held, talking about this made in New York City test kits. By June 1st, we were making over 60,000 tests. And again, he highlighted the participation of the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in making the viral transport media. We basically mobilized 13 technologists producing 75,000 VTM tubes per week. And the cost to the city was cheaper than they could get it even from commercial suppliers if they were available. So again, this was really our way of supporting the effort of the city to really help control our COVID pandemic. By the end of this September, we will have delivered over 1 million VTM tubes to the city, which has enabled over 1 million New Yorkers to be tested for COVID. Again, showing how rapidly we could pivot from not doing anything at all to really being this high level of supply. And clearly we could potentially perform similar things for our corporate clients. In parallel with this, we also help support biotech companies by providing them with access to research space. We rent out benches to individual biotechs and incubator companies. And again, this is a list of the current companies that are renting space at Einstein. Now, this is to now segue into something that Nancy spoke about and the Dean spoke about. And this is a new initiative that we're in the process of launching. We're currently in the process of negotiating with EDC in terms of the launching of this and funding of this research center. This is led by the Dean, me, Dr. Almo, Brian Pulowski, and Janice Paradiso, our intellectual property person. And the vision is basically to renovate 20,000 square feet of lab space that will provide cell therapy, GMP facility, CAR T-cell antibody optimization core, GMP protein antibody production core, a preclinical humanized mouse evaluation core, and for expanding our core facility services. So one question is, many of you may not know what CAR T-cells are. And why are CAR T-cells so important? And why is this something that the city wants, EDC wants to support in order to build up the biotech industry in New York City? And this is a really rapidly emerging field. And in 2017, the FDA approved the first CAR T-cell therapies for treating patients with cancer. Novartis Juno was approved in August 2017, Gilead Kite in October 2017. And the cost for one CAR T-cell treatment for a patient is between $400,000 and $450,000. So almost $500,000 to treat a patient. And so this is very costly, but on the other hand, these therapies can take a patient who otherwise would die and enable that patient to be cured. So it is an incredibly powerful technology that is being rapidly expanded and mobilized to other cancers and other indications. So to explain what CAR T-cells are, what makes them so special, kind of an analogy that I think about, again, I don't know how many of you were Game of Thrones TV fans, but I was one of them. So it kind of brought me back to kind of in time to the Archer days of a bow and arrow. But if you look at it and analyze, as we do as executives and administrators, strengths and weaknesses. So what are the strengths of an archer? Well, they're very, very efficient killers. They can selectively target and shoot arrows at enemies and not shoot arrows at people on the same side as them, their fellow army members, and so they don't target allies. However, they have some weaknesses. They're relatively slow. They don't move around very quickly. And in addition, their sight lines are very poor. Imagine they're in a battle and they're among thousands of other soldiers at the same height. They really can't see very well. Now, let's take another part of the army, horses. Well, their strengths, they're very fast, they're very mobile, and they're far taller than soldiers. However, what are the weaknesses? Well, they don't kill well, they can't aim and shoot arrows, and they don't know how to distinguish allies from enemies. So how could you take these two strengths and weaknesses and combine them in order to make a far more efficient warrior? And the answer is to make a centaur. And a centaur, you're all familiar with the legendary centaurs where there's part horse and part man. So now they have the strengths of both. They're efficient killers. They can target arrows at enemies, not allies. Very fast, very mobile, and their height provides excellent sight line for shooting. However, what's their weakness? The weakness is they don't exist. So if they don't exist, you really can't use them. They look good on paper, but they really won't help you very much. Well, now let's shift into a little immunology. So the major effector cells for eliminating tumors are T cells. And T cells use this specialized T cell receptor to recognize foreign materials such as that made by tumor cells or infected cells. And when it sees that, it kills that cell. So what are their strengths? They're highly mobile. They can rapidly move around through the body. They're very efficient killers of tumor cells, and they don't target self. They don't kill their own cells. However, the weaknesses are that this T cell receptor is very, very restricted in terms of how it can recognize antigen. It can only recognize antigen or the foreign tumor material in the patient itself. If I take my T cells, give them to somebody else, they won't work. And in addition, they don't grab onto it very, very well. They're very weakly binding to the foreign cells. And if we now take another effective molecule in the immune system, one that many of you now are very familiar with from reading about convalescent serum therapy for COVID-19, are antibodies. Well, antibodies also have strengths and weaknesses. Strengths, high affinity targeting. They bind very tightly to tumor molecules, tumor cells, and they work in everybody. So as opposed to T cells, my antibodies work very well in everyone who's listening to this talk, which is why the convalescent serum works well from a patient into somebody that you want to treat. What are the weaknesses? The weaknesses are that it's a soluble protein. It can't kill anything by itself. It can target a cell for maybe killing, but it doesn't kill cells by itself. It can bind to the cell, but that's pretty much all it's going to do. Well, how can we take the strengths and weaknesses of these T cell and antibody and combine them like we did with the Centaur? And the answer is by making CAR T cells. Because what the CAR T cell does is it replaces the T cell receptor, which is a very finicky, low affinity binder, with an antibody molecule, which binds very tightly and works in all patients. And now it has strengths of being high mobility of the T cell, high affinity targeting and killing conferred by the antibody, doesn't attack self, and it works in everybody. So I can make CAR T cells and use them basically to treat anybody because their antibodies will bind to whatever target I want. I can define that target. That target could be a leukemic antigen, it could be a lymphoma antigen, it could be a different solid tumor antigen, or it could be an infectious agent. Now, what's the weakness? It doesn't exist in nature. We don't have CAR T cells circulating in our blood, just like we don't have Centaurs. However, in contrast to Centaurs that we can't yet make, we can make CAR T cells artificially in the laboratory and then give them back to the patient. And that's why CAR T cell is such a powerful technology. And in fact, we basically now harvest T cells from a patient, we send them to a manufacturing facility where using genetic engineering, these CAR receptors are introduced into the T cells, and then we infuse them back into the patient where they circulate and find their target and eliminate them. And they can be used to treat leukemias, which work very well. And a major area of investigation is identifying ways of utilizing them for solid tumors. And in addition, we could also use them to treat infections. So one thing that my laboratory is working on, this is a paper we published last year, collaborating with a company called Lentigen, which some of you may know about, demonstrating that we could actually mobilize CAR T cells in a mouse model to eliminate HIV-infected cells. And we're currently in the process of getting FDA approval for clinical trials that we hope to start in the beginning of 2021. So CAR T cells has generated a tremendous amount of excitement in the investment technology. Recent IPOs have started different companies raising over $1 billion. Gilead acquired Kite Pharma in 2017 for almost $12 billion. Celgene bought Therapeutics for $9 billion. And the hematological malignancy market is expected to reach $3 billion by 2025. And I think that's actually an underestimate, because if these CAR T cells work, they're going to be used to actually treat patients. And there are tremendous numbers of clinical trials that are currently ongoing, 144 current trials in the United States, again, showing either treating hematological malignancies or solid tumors. Tremendous growth. And there are two major barriers that prevent wider use of CAR T cell therapeutics, identifying new tumor antigen, and making and optimizing antibodies that specifically bind to the tumor antigen and don't bind to our own cells. The CAR T cells are only as good as the quality of the antibody that's used to target them, and therefore optimizing that antibody is crucial. And developing CAR T cell products that target and eliminate solid tumors. So there's a tremendous opportunity for biotech companies to now develop the next generation of CAR T cells and broaden the application of CAR T cells. That is why we strongly felt there was a huge market for this that was unmet, because there's a tremendous undersupply of companies that can provide these CAR T cells that can be used to treat patients, as well, do these clinical trials, as well as optimizing the CAR that binds to the antibody. So our overarching goal was to put Einstein and Montefiore and its immunotherapeutic researchers at the forefront of global biomedical enterprise. to work with biotech industry to link our research-intensive academic campus and integrated healthcare delivery system that the Dean Tomaselli just spoke about to accelerate the development of innovative cell-based therapies and biological treatments. The rapid mobilization we demonstrated for making BTM is just one example how rapidly we can mobilize our expertise to serve external vendors. Synergize with Montefiore's massive plan to increase healthcare delivery and expand the economy of the Bronx, and also leverage the growth of the Bronx that we feel is going to really blossom with the upcoming construction of a Metro North station right across the street from Einstein that will connect Connecticut to Grand Central, to Penn Station, that Guy will speak about in more detail in a few minutes. That's going to drive economic and job growth for Bronx residents. And again, this is basically just a cartoon showing how all these different services that are going to be provided by Embark will all synergize to be able to service companies that are making these cars and CAR T cells and need to do clinical trials to determine whether they are effective. And we will basically serve from the initiation of the project, optimizing the antibodies and CARs, making both biologics and cells that are GMP that can be transfused into patients, and then using our Montefiore health system to do these clinical trials. And this is just showing the proposed area of renovation. This is, we have a large number of available space for renovation in the Van Etten building that's on our campus. And this is just one wing that we propose to renovate, 12,000 square feet. And this is just showing how the building is shaped, has 3 wings. Each one has between 10 and 12 and 10,000. We have over 100,000 square feet of undeveloped space that we could renovate for potential biotech and industrial partners. And again, we're looking for partners to do this. We also will be renovating space to house a specialized humanized mouse vivarium to enable us to do preclinical studies that can be provided to the FDA to get approval for the next step, namely putting them into patients to do preclinical trials to clinical trials. So again, the overarching vision I want to leave with you is this synergy. Biotech and pharma companies were open and very interested in partnering with you. Embark will enable us to develop CARs, CAR T cells, other soluble immunotherapeutics, including antibody therapeutics, both design, optimization, and production. And then we could either make these CAR T cells and then work with Montefiore to develop clinical trials to then bring them from the bench into the bedside and into the commercial arena. So again, I want to thank you for your attention. And again, please feel free to follow up with me or Dean Tomaselli for further information. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, that was great. Thank you both. Very, very impressive. Just one question. Is there any other medical centers in New York City that currently have a CAR T-cell GMP facility?
Right, so there are other medical centers in New York City that do. The overwhelming majority of the usage is internally for products that are being made by their own investigators. So for example, Memorial Sloan Kettering has a very active CAR T-cell research program of their investigators that CAR T-cells are being made. But for commercial clients, there really is not a very significant service available for doing that in New York City academic medical centers.
So this is very outward facing.
Exactly, and this is really an unmet need that is available. And again, we have spoken to facilities that are located in various centers throughout the country, and every one of them has told us that the need is tremendous. They can't serve that need, and the waiting time anywhere between 6 months to a year before they even get to the jobs that they have accepted.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because some of the venture capitalists in Boston, for example, have built their own facility just to service their companies, because all the companies need to be able to use this service, and they can't all build it themselves, and there's just not enough infrastructure to support them. So this could be a really important resource for New York City and the Bronx right now.
And Dean Tomaselli can address this, but again, we're working with the EDC as a potential funding agent, but again, we're open for other venues and ways of funding this facility or expanding this facility. And Dean Tomaselli can address that, given how much undeveloped space we have available for renovation.
Yeah, I think that there's opportunities for collaboration, not only through a program like Embark, but also citing startups, for example, or early phase companies to our campus to take advantage of this, but also to take advantage of, in the first part of Dr. Goldstein's talk, all the shared facilities that we have that are, some of them can be accessed remotely, but many of them, the advantage of being close actually enhances the ability to use some of these core facilities. Because again, if you're starting up something, you don't want to have to replicate everything that you might need in the process of developing a product, developing a test, so on and so forth. So we're open for collaboration in a number of different ways, both through manufacturing specific products for you, but also making space available for startups to actually be a part of our ecosystem.
So that's a really important point, because I think for years, one of the reasons that the entrepreneurial economy in New York was slow to emerge was because the academic medical centers, as you pointed out, were so strong in bringing in research support and licensing activity from the pharma companies, but hadn't really started their own kind of programs to create and commercialize their technology through new companies. And what is Einstein, NYU and Mount Sinai and Columbia in particular have spent a lot of time and resources in developing those internal programs now. And, they have boot camps for entrepreneurs, and they have executives and residents to work with students who are interested in creating companies. What is Einstein doing in this respect?
Well, I would say we're doing a few things. One, there's an internal kind of education and seminar series for our investigators in exactly this space. We comb through all of our research grants to look for opportunities for commercialization, because sometimes scientists are thinking about the science and they're not thinking about what the opportunities are that science creates. So we're also providing them with education. We have a very active invention disclosure patent committee that's looking at basically things that either we prompt or that investigators send to us for the concept of commercialization. And again, we're trying to create this outward-looking facility to promote partnership. Because the way this works is if somebody has an exemplar and they see something like this working well, they're much more likely to try and pursue it in their own science. So providing access to what we have on our campus, including the intellectual firepower, which is massive, but also the infrastructure, and creating not only companies that are generated by internal research, but people from the outside might want to locate in the Bronx because of availability of space at a relatively lower price, for example, than Manhattan, and access to core facilities that are literally right down the hall from where you might be working. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing at Einstein.
Yeah, and traditionally, it's interesting, is access has been an issue, right? Because you're so far north compared to some of the other academic medical centers. But now with the new station going in right next door, the accessibility will be much easier than it has been in the past. Yep,
I think that's right.
So just one final question before we kind of turn it over to Simone Healthcare. You played such an amazing role in the response to COVID, and I really congratulate you on those measures. I mean, in March, we actually had many members from our membership in the construction community and design community talking about how they went in and really helped our academic medical centers to create facilities on the spot, in gymnasiums and sports fields and parks, you name it. And it was really quite inspiring. And I think hearing about your efforts have been quite inspiring too. So you've got a large program focused on infectious disease. And what do you think about pandemics? I mean, pandemics in the future. I mean, probably we're in store for more of these, right?
Oh, well, we've had virtually every 5 years a virus jump from an animal host to a human, and have been variably successful in containing at the point of discovery pandemics, whether that's Ebola, whether that's MERS, whether that's SARS-CoV-1, and now SARS-CoV-2, which really did escape in a big way. And in a big way in the Bronx, our health system evaluated 80,000 patients who were positive for COVID in about an 8-week period of time. At the peak, we had 2,000 people in our hospital system who were infected with COVID. We admitted 12,000 people with a peak of about 2,000 at any one given time. We were able to discharge, about 10,000 of those folks. Unfortunately, 2,000 died. We have a pandemic program that's really aimed at trying to mitigate, prevent, develop therapeutics and testing before this becomes a huge problem. And much of the work of this group is aimed towards things that are being discovered outside the Bronx, outside the shores of the United States, so mitigation can occur in the place of origin rather than mitigation or trying to deal with the problem once it gets here. So we're committed to this. Our group of investigators in this space actually began with Ebola, have developed therapeutics for Ebola, not just cell therapy, but also monoclonal antibody therapy, and specifically tailored and customized antibodies that they developed for these diseases. So we are going to be faced with pandemics, and they're going to occur regularly. We can't anticipate when the next one will be, where it will occur, what type of virus it'll be, but trust me, they are going to be part of our future, medical future. And I might ask Dr. Goldstein to comment, as he's been an absolute leader in the area of HIV and management of HIV, and hopefully on the cusp of a therapeutic that's going to cure and eradicate even the low levels of HIV that exist in patients who are on highly active antiretroviral therapy. So Harris, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, 2 points I want to make. Number one is that HIV generated an unbelievable body of knowledge about how viruses infect and how to both diagnose and treat viruses. So the testing that we rapidly were able to develop for COVID-19, the ability to rapidly sequence and identify COVID-19 within a matter of weeks of when it presented, that's all due to the background expertise that was developed by HIV researchers. And the same way too, the rapid development of vaccines is all an offshoot of the HIV research program. So again, the investment in HIV research has paid tremendous dividends in terms of enabling us to rapidly mobilize to COVID-19. If we had not had this expertise, we may still not even know what's causing COVID-19, as hundreds of thousands of patients are dying around the world. The second point I want to make is, to me at least, we learned that we can't depend upon anybody else to help us. New York City has to take care of itself. We can't depend upon other people to make tests for us. We can't depend upon other people potentially to make therapeutics for us. And that's why it's really important for us to develop our own infrastructure that we could rapidly mobilize and utilize for the next pandemic. And that's why the investment by the EDC and other groups in New York City biotechnology is not only going to help us to build an industry and generate jobs, but it's also going to enable us to have the infrastructure to rapidly pivot and respond to what we think may be the next pandemic.
So Nancy, I noticed there are a couple of questions in the chat as well that we can probably address. I mean,
want to pick some of those up? Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of them is about CAR T cells and how they're introduced to a target site. Well, they're delivered intravenously. One of the challenges with solid tumors is actually getting them to the right place in the solid tumor. But with liquid tumors, much easier because they're intravenously administered. And again, I'll ask Harris to comment on that. And then the other question is artificial intelligence being implemented as well to look at trends. And certainly not only at our place in our systems and computational biology program, but in many places around the world. Immediately before I came to Einstein, I was at Johns Hopkins for many years, and you know what their website looks like. And they're using AI methods to try and track COVID and other diseases worldwide. So Harris, maybe you can comment on those questions.
Yeah, that's a really great question because the CAR T cells are infused, as the dean said, intravenously. But how do you get that cell into the tumor? And what you really need is kind of like a GPS system. So the same way that you get into an Uber and the driver may not know anything about New York City, but he puts it into his software to target where he's going to take you to. So you need to do that for cells as well, and that's a major area of research. So one can imagine if on the CAR, in addition to having the tumor-specific antigen, you have another antibody that localizes it to the pancreas if there's a pancreatic tumor, to the breast if it's a breast tumor, to the lung if it's a lung tumor, that now could accelerate and have them all home to the area where the tumor is. So again, these are major areas of research to develop the next generation of CAR T cells that we hope to be able to support with the EMBARK program.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Those were great responses to our audience. So Guy, this is all very exciting for the Bronx, and I'm, applaud you and your company in identifying this as an area that's kind of ripe for life science commercialization. So tell us more about what you're doing up there.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Megan and I are so pleased to be with all of you today. And this opportunity really grew out of coming to many of your conferences over the last couple of years and listening to so many of the leaders in life sciences and healthcare talk about what they were doing on the east side and the west side and in lower Manhattan. And Megan and I approached Nancy along with Dr. Tomaselli, and we said, well, what about the Bronx? There's a lot happening here as well, and that led to our opportunity to be with you today. And before proceeding, certainly to commend Albert Einstein College of Medicine and the Montefiore Medical Center for all the work that they have done just in the last 6 or 8 months with COVID, but what they've been doing for a long time, as you can see from the slides that Dr. Tomaselli and Dr. Goldstein shared. And we've had a long relationship with Montefiore and Albert Einstein for many years as well. So we have been working here really for 2 decades now, and I'll get into a little bit of the history shortly, but for what we are talking about today, we answered an RFP that was put forth by New York State ESD, Empire State Development. The Bronx Psychiatric Center for Children had been a mainstay and continues to be in the Northeast Bronx for decades, and they had recently undertaken and were soon to finish construction of all new facilities for their clients and patients. And that would make 33 acres available adjacent just to the south and contiguous to our existing campus. And we responded to that RFP in November of 2013, actually submitted it in December of that year, and negotiated and talked with ESD throughout 2014 and negotiated with them, and finally at the end of the year, just over the Christmas holiday, signed the agreement where we would go forward and purchase the property. And we have been working with the state ever since. It's been a long and winding road, as someone once said, and we've been through all of our environmental research and traffic studies and air studies, and we will be closing this coming April or May and starting construction immediately thereafter. Our project is 1,800,000 square feet, which will be developed in 2 phases. The first phase, which we will start next spring, is really 3 buildings effectively, or 4 buildings. We will reposition the 2 buildings on the screen in the lower left. One that you see now is a building of over 300,000 square feet, and we will start on that first, call that 1, and then we will move to the building that Megan is pointing to now, or 1A. They're known as Marconi 1 and Marconi 2. Marconi 2 is a building of almost 600,000 square feet with 100,000 square foot floor plates. We will also build in the first phase 100 residential units, apartments, which will be available for researchers and scientists and doctors and nurses and other staff and other individuals who will be working on the campus. These will not be market ready or market available apartments. They'll only be leased to those organizations and institutions that are renting space on the campus for their employees and coworkers. We found that to be, through our research, very important as to what is happening with Bloomberg on Roosevelt Island. This was not an original component of our project. We went back to the state and said we need to make this a component of the project. This is a planned project through design guidelines with New York State. And so all of the zoning is through a negotiated agreement, which is part of our purchase. So we have included in the first phase 100 apartments, and in the second phase, which will be another 150 units, which will come with 3 other buildings. But we are starting with our Marconi 1 building, Marconi 2 building, the 100 apartments, and a 20,000 square foot retail building to serve the needs of all of the different people who will be working here. Interesting, as Dr. Tomaselli and Dr. Goldstein spoke, we've been working on a lot of different things with Albert Einstein, and we look at them as a very good partner where startups could find their way over to Van Netten and share a lot of the services and the vivariums that are already in place and so valuable. We look at ourselves as being the receptacle and the receiver of all of that success that we hope will be coming from the Manhattan building and the Albert Einstein College campus over to our buildings and finding their way into really translating a lot of this research into commercially viable science and delivery, which will not only be good for all of the residents of the Bronx and the city of New York and the United States, but also to the Albert Einstein College and Montefiore Medical Center. We know how challenged our hospitals and academic medical centers are, and it's very hard to make it through the year just on income that the insurance companies choose to give back to you. So we know how valuable this work is to the medical center and the academic institutions. As you can see on our rendering, there are 7 buildings total. There are 4 buildings in the first phase, and we will also redevelop 2 of the baseball fields that are very important to the Bronx Little League franchise. We will take the 2 older fields that are on the property today and build new baseball fields over the next couple of years, and that will be part of the local baseball Little League complex, and they'll be made available, of course, during non-Little League hours to anybody that's working here for baseball and other activities on those nice fields. We can move to the next slide.
Yeah, and we're very unique as a New York City project. This is 75 acres, with the expansion being on 33. So we will offer the space for companies to grow and mature out of smaller spaces and into larger spaces, which we think is unique to our project.
Yeah, it's also one of the first live, work, play environments that's being constructed in the city. You know, you have commercial life science space, and you have academic space, and then you have the residential neighborhoods nearby. But there's not many developments that have incorporated, you know, the live and work and play elements the way you have. What else besides the ball fields are you anticipating there?
So you're right, Nancy. We look at this really as a lifestyle ecosystem with all the different uses that we've worked with the state to permit here and how we've gone through the zoning. So of course, even we looked at this as a lifestyle opportunity as well as a life sciences opportunity really since we began. And we've tried to design the campus for indoor and outdoor. Even before COVID, we were looking at indoor break spaces and workspaces, but equally as important, all of the outdoor workspaces and collaborating spaces and walking trails and benches and tables where you could have an opportunity to work outside by yourself or with colleagues. We've also prepared for an outdoor space. You can see it just to the northeast of the Marconi 1 building. It's an outdoor amphitheater and sculpture garden. So we're going to do our very best in the Northeast Bronx to create an outdoor environment. We are doing our best and working with city planning to eliminate as much of the surface parking as possible and more green space. We are finding with Uber and certainly with the train station, we've already taken 1,000 parking spaces out of this project that were designed into the project in 2015. And between 2015 and 2019, we've already eliminated the need for 1,000 cars. And if we could find a way with the train and other means of transportation, we'd love to take another 1,000 cars off the campus. And hopefully public transportation will make way for that. And we can not only lower the need for garage and for parking spaces, but every car space we don't have to pay for is more green for outdoor life space. We're also looking at other places in the buildings for recreation. We all see what Google does and the other companies that are leading us into the future as to how employees want to work in the office and how they want to share time with colleagues. And we've all learned in the last 6 months that good ideas don't always come at our desk between 8 and 6. They come in some of the craziest places that we're now working from. So we will do our very best in this unique location. We're just a little bit south, and you'll see Megan's going to put up the map. We are just a couple of miles to the south of Westchester County. We're about a half an hour by car, by subway from Manhattan. The new train, as we said, Dr. Goldstein mentioned, there are 4 new train stations coming to the Bronx. Thank you to Governor Cuomo. And one of them is going to be right at our doorstep. And that will get you up to Stamford, Connecticut, probably in 35 minutes, and into Manhattan in about 20. It is on the Acela train track running into Penn Station. And we think that is just a huge impact that will bring people who want to live in Manhattan, whether it's a young researcher or a scientist or a physician, right up to our campus, and will bring that same researcher or scientist or physician who maybe has a couple of kids and wants to live in the suburbs up in Stamford, down to their office at Einstein or Montefiore. And we just think that means of public transportation is going to be huge. You can also get to JFK in 25 minutes and LaGuardia in 12. We just think that we sit at a very unique place. We're not in Manhattan, but we're close to it. And we're not in Westchester, but we're close to it. And Megan and I are sitting in our conference room in our building here today. And it is a unique place to work. And we think that that's why we're taking on this new development. We've been here for a long time. As you can see on this timeline, the first building, what's the 1200 Waters Place building, was actually purchased in 2000 and 2001. It was a Richard Meyer design building that the state of New York had constructed for the Bronx Psychiatric Center, and for a couple of reasons, they sold it. It was one of the original Leukemia buildings that leaked like you wouldn't ever believe, and I think they gave up in fixing all the leaks, and the building was put on the market through auction, and it was bought by the Simone development companies. And we actually took down a good part of the building and reworked the rest of it and added on to it. And lo and behold, in 2001, Visiting Nurse Services knocked at the door for a 60,000 square foot occupancy. And Joe Simone said, oh, gee, maybe this should be a medical campus. And it became a multiple opportunity campus, medical being one of the very important. We're also home to state, federal, and city agencies. But as the Tower 1 building was completed in 2008, it was about a third medical at the time. And over the last 10 years to 12 years, it's become more and more medical. Montefiore has leased a number of spaces in the building, and in 2000, early on in the, we're having a fire alarm here of all times. So early on in the building, Montefiore leased the entire 11th floor for a ambulatory orthopedic center, very, very successful in 30,000 square feet. They've since leased another 30,000 square feet. But more importantly, that set the stage for their leasing of what we call Tower 2, which is the Montefiore Ambulatory Hospital. It's 300,000 square feet of ambulatory hospital or ambulatory center. I use the word hospital in quotes. There are 16 operating suites in the building, 2 full floors of radiology, and then many floors for physician consults and exams. Very successful, a very important component of the Montefiore medical system in how they treat patients, where people will not have to come to the hospital any longer for a variety of things that we all need on a regular basis. The last building on the campus was opened in 2015. It's our atrium building, which is it's a 300,000 square foot building, about half medical, half office, and it is the location of our 125 room Residence Inn Marriott Hotel, which until COVID was one of the most successful by occupancy hotels in their chain. We've used the hotel very well over the last number of months. We've been housing nurses and doctors and all kinds of people that have needed to be near the Einstein and Montefiore campus. So on the last slide, or on the last picture on the right, you can see a rendering of the train station, and there's one more rendering of, you have the full?
Yeah, it's empty. So
all right. So next slide is, I apologize for my friend in the background. If I could get rid of him, I would. I'll just talk over him to the best of my ability. So this is the site plan.
And hopefully there's not an actual fire.
Well, we're not leaving. We're here to stay. We have a balcony and they'll catch us. As you can see on the site plan, Marconi 1 and Marconi 2 on the lower left are the buildings that we will start first. Megan will highlight Marconi 2 in a moment. You can see Marconi 3 is our residential building, and Marconi 4 will be the last building in phase 1. And then we have the other buildings in phase 2. And the train station, which Megan is pointing to, is right at the campus. It's by the hotel. And we expect that to arrive with the first train in and out sometime in the 2023 or early 2024 time component. And you can see just over your shoulder on the upper right where the Marconi 2 and Marconi 1 buildings will reside, right there. And they're about a 5-minute walk away from the train station. So we also look at that train station finally as a connector, which we don't have other than a long walk. This will be not only a way to get from the north platform and the south platform, but it's a way for us to get over to Einstein. It will be a simple walk up and down the stairs or elevators for those who need them. But this will be a true connector from our campus to the Albert Einstein and Montefiore campus. And then I will be as gracious as Gordon was. I will now turn the important part of the presentation over to Megan.
Thank you, Guy. So this is really an academic center for higher education, healthcare, life sciences, research and development, all supported by commercial enterprise, retail, hospitality, and housing. These are the first 2 buildings of phase 1, Marconi 1 and Marconi 2. Marconi 2 is what we are positioning as a life sciences building. As Guy mentioned, we will have design guidelines for this project in lieu of New York City zoning. Life sciences and pharmaceutical manufacturing uses under use group 17B are permitted uses on our campus. So Marconi 2, this building is approximately 580,000 square feet. We'll have ground floor retail in this building, an opportunity for private entrances and elevator banks to create a building within building opportunity. And we are pursuing LEED and wellness certifications. So we have a lot of features here that are perfect for life sciences. The building itself offers the infrastructure and flexibility for a variety of research and development opportunities. We have floor plans up to 100,000 square feet, which provide the flexibility for companies to design their space as they need. We'll have interior courtyards to provide natural light in the center of the building. There's generator capacity. The 6th floor will have up to 16-foot floor-to-floor heights. We'll have significant electrical capacity with an on-campus powerhouse of loading docks and freight elevators, shaft and roof space available for tenant-dedicated HVAC units, up to 150-pound floor loads, significant basement space for tenant equipment, and abundant on-site parking. As Guy had previously mentioned, we are looking to create as much green space as possible. The entire campus will have about 10 acres of green space, but another unique offering that we have is abundant parking on site. This phase will provide about 4,000 parking spaces in addition to the 4,000 that are serving the existing campus. We really think the Bronx is primed for life sciences. We have cost, benefit, the location, access, and housing. Cost, we will be significantly lower than Manhattan, and we will be offering new product. We are located across from Albert Einstein, and as we heard, they are doing a tremendous amount of research, and we really feel that it's important for these life sciences hubs to have access to academic and medical institutions. Access, as Guy went through the map earlier, we have great highway access. We have access to airports, which provide national and international linkage. The train, we have both the 6 train right by our campus. We offer shuttle service to the 6 train, and then the Metro North station, which will be coming in 2024, as Guy mentioned. We also have housing opportunities. Not only is the Bronx booming in terms of development, it's still affordable in terms of housing, and we will have on-campus housing, which we think is a great opportunity. Guy, you have a daughter that's getting a PhD, and as you know.
I've learned a lot, as I've shared with Dr. Tomaselli over the last years. We've been spending time together. I have a daughter who's a 3rd-year PhD candidate in chemistry, as she was picking where she was going to live, it was very important to her that she could get to her lab in short order. So she's a 5-minute car ride away, she's a 10-minute bike ride away, and she can walk in 15 minutes from her apartment to her lab building because she is regularly going over to check her experiments at all times of the day. So we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from her. Some of the improvements that we've made to this rendering come at the suggestion of Isabel. I've been through her wet lab. I've been through her dry lab. I've been to the basement of the chemistry building on her campus. And as I said, we all learn a lot through whatever sources are that are available to us.
And the housing and retail on campus will really create a 24/7 ecosystem. And with the connection to Einstein, that is a college campus, and it's a great energy that has, and connecting the two will really be a great opportunity.
You know, we are, I guess, Megan and I and everybody here in our organization, we're the biggest fans of Einstein. You know, not only have we've seen what they've done, which is remarkable, but as Megan said, their campus, it brings me back to my own, you know, college days of what it feels like. And we just want to see tremendous success out of Einstein. And not just because their success is our success, but they're really doing so much for the Bronx. And when you heard Dr. Tomaselli talk about that 2,000 of the 12,000 people did not make it out of the hospital, as we know from just watching the news every night, that's a very, very high percentage. And it tells you, just as we also know, just hypertension and obesity and kidney issues. You know, the Bronx is not the healthiest place in the world. And when we answered the RFP, one of the things that the state was looking for was our commitment to improving the health and welfare of the Bronx community, and that's why we've done our best to work with Montefiore and Einstein on this project to see if we can bring the necessary things to the Bronx that will help everybody here.
Yeah, and we have miles of bike paths and walking paths on campus, but with the bike paths, we're hoping that the entire neighborhood will become more active and environmentally friendly with the use of bikes, which will be great.
So on that note, we've got a question here. Are these zero carbon energy efficient buildings?
They're not zero carbon. We are working with our architects and engineers to meet the various constraints that are being put forth by the city for 2035 and beyond. We are working with how we're going to retain our water, how we're going to be very energy efficient in our mechanical systems and electrical systems. We're not going to be zero, but we are working very hard, one, because it's the right thing to do, but also by 2025, the penalties will be significant. So one, you know, just from being a good citizen, and two, from being smart, we are working very diligently with our professionals to get as close to zero and neutral as possible. We will not get all the way there.
So can you describe a couple of the innovations that you've implemented to kind of achieve this? Because as we all know, these buildings are energy sinks, right? And we've got to turn that around if we really want New York to be a center of life sciences because of the upcoming regulations. So can you talk about a couple of innovations that you might have decided to implement?
Sure. I can give you a list of things that we are working on, certainly in our water retention. We will be working with New York City EPA on bioswales and how we will retain water on site. We are drilling wells right now, our test wells on the property to explore geothermal opportunities for our cooling and heating. We are looking at energy efficient glass. Of course, a lot of the efficiency is in the mechanical system. So that is why we're desperately hoping that we can hit geothermal opportunities, which will be a big piece of it. So we want to be LEED, you know, high standard LEED. It's good for marketing. It's good for our own efficiencies. And as I said, Nancy, you know, we're right now in the real, we're in the weeds, as they say, in designing the buildings, but we're looking at our water retention and bioswale. We're drilling wells for geothermal. We're exploring very energy efficient glass.
We're looking into solar.
Yeah, solar options. You know, the ones that I'm mentioning are some of the more far-reaching, all the usual suspects. You know, energy efficient lights and energy efficient bathroom fixtures. All of that is normal. That's standard procedure that everybody in our industry does. We are trying to go, you know, outside the box and beyond the norm, and we are prepared to make significant upfront capital investment to do this, because as the payback in energy efficiency will be there, and certainly we don't want to be subject to the draconian penalties that the city is you know, putting forth in only 15 years. So we're working very diligently with the architects and engineers, and we're happy to anybody that remains and has interest in the project. We'll share all of this with them. We want to have a project that we're all very proud of going forward.
Yeah, and Nancy, to your point, in order to position this building for life sciences, we think we need to have a lot of those features incorporated.
Right. That's a very, very important component to what people are looking for these days.
So that's all we have on our project.
Well, this is quite amazing. As I said, I think that, you know, this has been under the radar for a lot of people. I had not heard what's going on in the Bronx, and it's very, very exciting. And I think that between the medical school and, you know, your vision for this development, you have really kind of incorporated, you know, the life science, you know, park of the future. And so it's great that to know that something of this size and magnitude is actually in New York now and available to companies that want to locate. And of course, we know that there's a lot going on in Westchester, and the proximity to Westchester kind of being kind of the midway point between Manhattan and Westchester could be a very advantageous position for you.
Yeah, this was certainly, again, Nancy, thank you for the opportunity for us and Albert Einstein College of Medicine to do this today. This is, as they would call on Broadway, a soft opening. We will be coming to the market very soon with a lot of information and a big splash and wanting people to be aware of what we are doing, what Einstein's doing, what's happening in the Bronx. Because as you said, we're really very close to some exciting things that are happening in Westchester. We know that Westchester now is becoming a very important component in life sciences with a leading company in Westchester County. That's very, very important. And of course, all the things that are beginning and underway in Manhattan. So we're happy to be in the middle. And we'll be telling our story loud and clear over the months to come.
And there is a brochure on Marconi 2 available on the New York City Builds Bio website.
Terrific. So to our audience right now, we've had a few questions that we've been asking, but I'm wondering, you know, as you have been listening, what questions have been coming up in your minds? So here's a question from Charlene Quo. What is the breakdown of public versus private funding financing the laboratory and life science offices in the project?
All of our funding is private, it's ours. We are not receiving any money from the city or state of New York. We've worked with them very closely and how to design and zone and plan this, but we are not asking for or receiving any public funding.
Okay. And I guess, you know, is there the possibility that some additional buildings from Einstein or Montefiore could be actually implemented on the campus?
So we've had conversations with Dr. Tomaselli over the last couple of years, and I think as they continue, and he can answer this as well, but we hope in the future that as they are successful and grow out of their space or have a different ideas of things they'd like to do, that we would welcome them with open arms, as they say, to join us. You know, Montefiore is already a good partner in their tenancy on our existing campus, and we would hope that they would continue on either as Montefiore, Einstein, or both. And we're here when they're ready.
Great.
I think this is an important future to pursue. As Guy and Megan already mentioned, I still see patients, and I see patients in Tower 2. So we're already partnering in that sense, and it would be nice to build an entire ecosystem that includes Hutchinson Metro Center, our campus, and other pieces of the Bronx, maybe even in part some components of health and hospitals, because on our campus, Jacobi Hospital is right there. So there's already a lot of pieces in place, and I think trying to figure out going forward how best to make this work, I think, is in all of our interests.
Well, terrific. So I want to thank everyone so much, because this has been an absolutely fascinating discussion about all of the components that go into, an academically related life science center and a commercial center. And that's exactly what our members are looking for, is information about this that they can then learn from and take to new projects that would be constructed throughout the city. So if there's no further comments, then I would like to invite Carolina to put us into chat rooms so that we can all talk to each other and our audience can get to ask questions of you directly. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.